Hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today at ProQuality Community. My name is Oksana Belarus. I'll be your host today. Also, a quick shout out to our tech moderator, Timur, who will be responsible for our tech stack during the whole presentation. And today we are talking about testing uncertainty, stability in shared libraries, a topic that's highly relevant for teams working with reusable components across multiple products. As we all know, ensuring stability without blocking progress is a real challenge. And I'm excited to welcome Pavel Rumiantsau, a software engineer with deep experience in building and maintaining shared libraries in complex environments. Pavel isn't a tester, but he works closely with testing teams to make sure that things don't break out for the downstream users. Pavel, great to have you here at ProQuality Community. And dear audience, feel free to drop your questions in the YouTube chat or the community platform. We will cover them during the Q&A session. So, Pavel, let's start with a quick question. What do you think breaks stability more often, code or people?
Hi, Oksana. Hello, everyone, and thanks for having me here. I'm glad to be able to share some knowledge. And today's topic is directly related to your question. I think it's a very interesting one because overall, I might probably answer with a really lazy answer because like overall people usually write some code or generate at this moment, so we might say that overall it's people, but I would say in a wider context it's always about the people because sometimes you cannot predict like how your customers will actually use something that you're preparing, especially when you're working with something that you basically just don't understand how might be used in the real world, in real scenarios.
Mhm. So, thank you for your answer. And so, let's get started. I will pass the floor to you.
Sure, thank you. So yeah, a few more things about me. So as Oksana mentioned, my name is Pavel Rumiantsau. I'm an engineering manager at EPAM. And yes, I'm an engineer, so I'm mainly working with some front-end solutions. And I'm working with front-end solutions already for more than 12 years. And I had several projects when I had to directly communicate not only with our client, who we actually developed something, but also with like real clients, with real customers. And like it was really exciting, but also very surprising when we found how customers are actually using something that we're building, even and when we are trying to do something that is not, like completely shared across a lot of different clients. However, today, I want to cover a specific case from one of my projects that actually required me to implement something that was shared across a lot of different customers. And it was really unclear how they will use it. So we are going to talk a little bit about the uncertainty, what it is, like what we are talking about. We are going to discuss my case and probably some problems that we had during the implementation, during the real work and integration. And I will try to cover some technical solutions, even though I don't want to provide you any, like the code or something. It's also very important to mention some testing approaches that we had, even not only on the QA side, but also on the engineering side. And I also want to mention something about processes. So let's begin, and probably it makes sense to begin with, some Wikipedia theory, sort of. So what is uncertainty? Basically, we can say that it's a lack of complete understanding, like what will happen, what the true value of something is, like which outcome is correct, and so on. So we can say that when we are implementing something, we're not 100% sure that we completely understand that this something is basically something for you and for other people as well. That basically when they're trying to use your product, they're using this in the same way how you would probably use it. So in my specific case, we worked on the project when we had to basically kind of sell tickets. So the technical problem here was that we had to implement some shared library that will be used across multiple projects on our side and also on like other customer sites, which means that overall, it was something reusable that was integrated by some external vendors. So the closest and like the best way to describe what we probably did is by mentioning shared library. So anytime when you are working with some shared library, whether it's some material UI library or whether it's some set of design systems, whatever, you're usually working with one library that is just integrated into multiple projects. And in a lot of cases, you understand like how it should be integrated. So you kind of preparing the way, like preparing the API, the documentation, whatever needed. But sometimes there are some cases when you need to support multiple ways for integration, and you need to, give a chance for your customer to be able to add something in addition to the library that you are providing. So in our specific case, we had to support 3 different modes. We can name them full mode, layout mode, and minimal mode. So what's the difference? Full mode, it's kind of like a finished application. So it's a library, it's a whole set of functionality, including UI, some background jobs, whatever needed, just to be able to completely work with expect functionality from this area. So we might say that, since I mentioned that we were selling tickets, we might say that we can, for example, implement a block that will work as a basket, or we can implement a block that will work as a like a seat selection mechanism, so someone can actually choose what they want to buy and basically pay for it. The layout mode was a little bit more complicated but strange configuration that not many people actually used. However, we had to control only the UI, but the data that we actually had was coming from the external source. What do I mean? So imagine that you are implementing something really beautiful, like, again, seat selection, and you want to make sure that your customers can actually integrate this widget and they can choose a specific seat on their websites, but obviously the data is on their side, like specific ticket provider is just selling something with your solution. So this is kind of a layout mode, which basically still provide you a way how to integrate it, how to pass something to be able to render the data, but you don't know what exactly will be there. You also need to know like how your system will actually work in case if something wrong will be passed and whatever. And the last one, which surprisingly was one of the most used mod that we had, was minimal mode. In this case, it was really close to the layout mode. But the only difference is that in a lot of cases, customers are just like to use their own custom themes, colors, specific styles, fonts, and whatever. So they actually asked us to provide us a way to still create this layout, still make it, kind of beautiful, but their own way beautiful. Let's say it like this. So we can kind of try to compare it with the cloud provider solutions when we basically have those layers, when you do have infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. And obviously there is a lot of differences in here, but you can see that in a software as a service, we are basically controlling like what we are going to propose to our customers, how it's going to work and whatever, while when we're working with more, like bottom levels of this pyramid, we cannot fully predict what exactly will happen, and we have to make our system sometimes even more flexible than we initially want. So we know that we need to implement some widget like this. So again, like thinking about the seat selection widget. So obviously our plan is simple. We just bake in our widget. We just introducing our APIs or like a simple way how to pass some data into it, and everything should be pretty fine. Like you should be able to receive the final result quite quickly. But in reality, it's always like a different picture. So even at the beginning of this path, we found a lot of different problems, and the more we actually worked, more customers we actually had, it became more and more problematic. And let's actually try to, cover which problems we actually had. So first of all, I think the most obvious one, since we are talking about something visual, something that our customers can see, is how to do UI changes in the way to make sure that, like, after providing some changes in our code, we are not completely breaking our websites, we are not breaking someone else's website, whatever. We obviously need to think about the integration because, well, when we're implementing something on our side, it's clear what will happen and how other customers will actually integrate this. That's a question. And this question is kind of resolved with a third problem, which is documentation. And why documentation is a problem? Not in the way that just no one actually likes to write some documentation, but rather in the way that sometimes it's hard to provide a simple and like small enough documentation that will still contain all the information, but your customers will be able to integrate based on this documentation and will not make some mistakes. And kind of spoiler alert, even with a really beautiful documentation, pretty small, but with all like fully described steps, we still had at least one customer who did everything wrong. So other things are kind of maybe more technical. We had to think about the API because we worked with some external data. We had to actually expose some data from our services. Obviously, it was pretty clear that the way how we need to process our requirements is not always pretty clear because we don't fully understand what our customers actually want from us. And like the most technical thing, but still also the way how we were working with our deployments and overall releases, we had to think how to be able to control all the versions that we provide, because whichever version you actually deploy somewhere, this version might be used. And if you think that everyone will just use the last version, now there are a lot of customers who actually integrate in it once, and after that they don't have time, budget, or whatever to be able to update this. So one of the biggest problems that we actually had when we started implementation was support. And even on our side, like without even thinking about integration somewhere else, we had to support, like a lot of different devices. So you might imagine that people might actually want to buy tickets either from their computer or even from their mobile phones, sometimes from tablets. I hope no one actually wants to buy tickets from watches. And at this time, we actually didn't have to work with watches, but well, maybe sometimes in some project there will be that requirement. So we had to still, somehow restrict our requirements, because we understood that if someone will actually try to, buy a ticket on the enormous, gigantic screen on the Times Square, for example, it might work probably not as we expect, because, well, we don't know how they actually work and how big they are and so on. So we had to still provide some sort of minimal and maximum restrictions. So by saying that, like, this is type of mobile device that is the minimal supported that we can actually work with, because the design can stick to this position, and the max size, just to make sure that if you have larger screen, well, sorry, you just still have to, somehow restrict this size, because in other case it will be really hard to just search for some value somewhere. And we also had to obviously restrict our browser versions. So when we worked on these, Internet Explorer still was a thing, which is like bad. Like at this time, we had to actually support quite a lot of different strange cases. Obviously, right now, it's just much better. But I need to remind you that like sometimes some developers thinking that like Safari is a new Internet Explorer. Someone says that even Edge, even though it's kind of a Chrome, still might actually surprise you. So you need to consider that since you're working with something that might be open across like a lot of different configurations, a lot of different browsers, you need to set up rules. And here the last thing that I need to mention specifically related to this browser, there are some cases, some browsers, which does not allow you to do, like everything. For example, I remember that when we had to check the case with the Brave browser, it actually didn't work because Brave just by default disabling part of functionality that we used. And we basically had to update our documentation and tell our customers that, sorry, you cannot use it here because, well, our functionality just must be running and we cannot somehow restrict it. So technically, we had to think about how to basically control all of this. So our solution was quite simple, but still really nice. We had to think about some sandbox environment that would allow us to validate a lot of different cases. And in our scenario, we used Storybook. So Storybook, for those who don't know, it's a library that is basically providing you a way to simply build some documentation. And it's kind of, like a little bit different type of documentation. It's not something that you are usually writing on Wiki with just a lot of different pages with tons of text. It's more like a dynamic way to render something specifically in this environment and be able to dynamically configure it on the fly. So in this screenshot, you can see it's like just a random screenshot from the internet, but it's kind of highlighting the way how we used it. We had to basically split our applications, widgets, whatever, into smaller parts. And each smaller part actually had some predefined configuration, something that we wanted to show to our customers that you can use it in this way, you can use it in this way. And we also used kind of the same demo platform as a way for us to validate that everything is working. And we also provided dynamic fields, which allowed us to basically put some values inside and make sure that we understand how it's working. So at some stage, we were able to pass some URLs, like API URLs. We were able to pass some sizes and so on. And basically, overall, how it's working is that it's kind of like a proxy. So you're not directly integrating it into your application. Your application is working with a library that also integrated into this Storybook so that you can safely validate that everything is working in some specific environment before actually moving to the final one. So in terms of usage of this Storybook, we tried to do something like a design system when we had to combine all the documentation parts, all the implementation parts, and basically we applied a lot of different tests for this environment to be able to, render in multiple modes, to be able also to open this on multiple devices. So in terms of actual testing, it's kind of like one of the things that I want to talk a bit later, but still important to mention that when you're working with a real device, sometimes it's just different from the device that you kind of simulate when you resize Chrome or whatever. So in terms of approaches, how to make sure that we are kind of validating all solution, we had to apply a lot of different things. So you can see that we do have a lot of purely technical things like unit tests, end-to-end tests, whatever. We applied visual testing, which was really helpful for us, especially to cover the UI part, to cover the part how it would be integrated in multiple solutions. But we also had this, more uncertain part of our testing approaches, when we had to think how it will actually work with custom themes, how it will work with custom layout. What if someone will actually try to render it in the way that we never tried to render it? How it will actually integrate with our systems, not on the UI part, but rather on the technical part, on the API part. And obviously, we worked pretty closely with our product owners And we had to run a lot of A/B testing. So we had to validate a lot of different things because we were not sure that some functionality will actually work as expected. So yeah, it was really productive. Let's quickly try to, cover some parts of this and specify some details in regards of our project. So I don't want to talk a lot about, a standard testing pyramid that all engineers know about, like unit tests, integration tests, end-to-end tests. So obviously you do need to have a lot of them. Like this type of system most probably require everything to be covered. And we actually tried to cover as much as possible, especially on the end-to-end side, because we basically knew that if something like really, really minor will be broken, it might actually affect the whole application. The other thing that actually I want to cover in more details is related to visual testing. Visual testing is a way to basically just compare two things together. So what we did, we tried to apply visual testing for our applications, but it was not so effective because of the different data, because when you basically just open it across multiple devices, it might be different. So what we tried to do, we tried to actually stick to the storybook as our demo platform in the way that when you're actually running this storybook, you're trying to simulate the most, closest possible environment between different machines, between different developers, QA engineers, and whatever. We actually had to make sure that when we are working across other operation systems, that everything is working when you're running it not only on the Windows machine, but also on the Mac. We had to validate this on multiple browsers. And at that time, I remember that we didn't have the chance to actually fully use browser stack technologies to be able to go through everything and completely run on multiple browsers. However, overall solution was to be able to run them as some process and just try to make screenshots, compare them, and again, Internet Explorer was the thing. So it was really important to make sure that any change that you are doing is actually not breaking something. Actually, when we had the chance to use browser stack to be able to validate something on the custom mobile device, it was pretty important, and we tried to use it as much as possible. I think now I also need to mention one thing regarding mobile devices. When I told that we tried to stick to some restrictions and we tried to stick to sizes more than actual devices, it was the best solution, because when I initially joined the project, they actually tried to stick to device types. And imagine how surprised we were when we just received a new version of iPhone, which actually tried to open our application as on a tablet, just because they changed some parameters there. So basically, you need to understand that a lot of different devices had trying to do different jobs, and they actually displaying the content in a different way. So what about some custom options? We had something like custom themes, layouts, and so on. And obviously, there is no simple answer to this. What we specifically did, trying to, understand how to cover some cases. We tried to experiment a lot. And I mean a lot. So we had to validate a lot of different solutions. We had to learn based on something that actually worked and something that didn't work. We had to run a lot of A/B testing on multiple clients. And one of the things that actually helped us a lot was actually collecting the feedback from all the customers and our way to try to replicate everything. I think overall, no matter who you are, what you are working on, and what type of solution you have, it's always very important to understand what your final customer is actually doing, which problem they have, what they expect to have. Any those type of really business related questions are very helpful when you're actually implementing something for them, because every time when you're trying to implement something that just doesn't work for, it can work for one customer, but it will not work for another customer, that's probably not the best shared solution. So that's why sometimes we even had to, try to kind of generate clients for us. I mean, we tried to even sometimes use some randomizer tools to be able to just shuffle everything, prepare some custom layouts. We tried to pass whichever types of data we actually was thinking. Like, I remember that I've spent a lot of time actually trying to, completely break my own application, and I was able to do so. So I realized that on the, shift left approach, when you're breaking something and you still have a time to be able to fix that earlier than later, that's always better for you. And do not underestimate your clients, because again, as I mentioned, even if you're preparing a documentation that is basically, you think that it's covering completely everything, that it's like pretty clear because it's just a set of steps which you need to do to be able to integrate your solution. In a lot of cases, customers might actually think just differently. Sometimes they are not so technical. Sometimes they actually, thinking in different terms, and sometimes they actually trying to just get something different from your service, even from other application or like from other project that I worked on. I remember when we had the case when we didn't cover one important part of functionality because of the bug that was lost, and it existed in the system for quite a long time. And our customers never told us about it. So we knew about it basically just randomly because they came to us and asked us to do something that was like really, really strange. And we told them that our system does not work like this. Like, why are you asking it? And they told us that they do have this functionality that they configured when they basically just used this bug as a feature for them. And they asked us to, kind of extend this bug with an additional functionality. So yeah, sometimes clients are really surprising. So probably the last thing for today that I want to mention is that wherever you are doing something, when you built a version, when you validated it on different devices, in different functionality, when you basically just verified even with your clients that everything is working as you kind of expected, you might think that like at this stage, okay, I'm kind of done with this version. I'm just, pushing some new functionality. So every time when you're providing something, that small change might actually break something somewhere. And while you're working with a shared solution that is used across multiple clients, when you don't know who exactly and how are using this, that means that you need to, make really stable versions. However, you can still make some experimental versions. What we did, purely technically, we just decided to implement multiple versions, and so that when clients actually tried to use some solutions, they had to work with a specific versioning system. By default, since we implemented them as widgets, which decided to use the same approach as most of, for example, NPM libraries, and not only NPM are using, some were. So we had to work with major, minor, and patch versions. And not only with the specific versions, we also tried to implement several aliases, which helped us to deliver something, verified and stable. So we told our customers, okay, if you want to always use latest functionality, if you want to make sure that you receive everything and you want to have some quick changes, you can use version which we called vlatest. Vlatest was like latest version, but obviously we told them that, well, it might happen that something wrong will be in this version. Sorry. What we actually did for other customers who wanted to make sure that wherever they're changing something, but still using the same version of our widget, it's working as expected, we actually provided them V and, well, let's say it's N version, which means that this N is basically just any major version. So we had like V1, V2, and whatever. So this was our way to basically deliver something. That was our way to control that we understand what we are actually delivering. And return back to the previous point, every time when we actually made some changes, we try to document everything, because sometimes the documentation is not only required for you to understand like what is the purpose of your application, how it probably might be used by your clients, but also for your clients to understand what you're actually thinking, how you're trying to build systems for them, and how you're overall trying to, finish something great for them. At this stage, that's everything that I wanted to say, but the last remark from me. If you ever are working on the project, which actually require you to build something short, something that will be used across multiple applications, try to think about each application as a customer. Try to think that you are a customer, and try to think like how you would probably use this specific tool, what you would want to have from it, how you would probably try to break it if you just like to break something. So try to think about this not as purely technical thing, but try to be as artistic in the choice of actually working with it as possible.
So, Pavel, thank you so much for this talk and the practical approach. And special thanks for sharing a real-world scenario and unexpected solutions that definitely made this topic more relatable to test engineers. Your breakdown of testing approach and visual representations added great clarity to the discussion. So, dear audience, if you enjoyed this session, please scan QR code to rate the event and give a badge to our speaker. And now let's move on to the Q&A session. The first question from our audience is the following. I have more backend experience and I'm still fairly new to front end, so I'm not sure if this is a right question. But were hooks in custom components a requirement? If so, how did the team handle state updates for individual components while ensuring that hooks didn't cause invalid or inconsistent data?
So thank you for the question. If I understand that this is about React hooks, this time we actually didn't have React hooks, but overall, I will try to answer, in a more common way that will probably cover like all front-end solutions, maybe even not front-end. When you are working with communication across multiple components, applications, devices, whatever, you might actually think about them in a way when you're basically just saying something to different people, and you need to understand, like at this stage, how close you are to these people, how are they in the same context as you and whatever. So every time when you are in the same context, when basically they are expecting something from you and you are saying something to them, most probably the response will be correct. I mean, they would expect that you will, for example, technically send a string. You are sending them a string, so it's okay. When you're building something and you don't fully understand like what will be in response, for example, you're staying on the street and you're, screaming some questions, so you don't understand whether you will actually receive an answer for your question or a tomato in your face, you probably need to think about like how will you how will you handle some cases when you receive something that you don't expect. So in this case, there are, kind of two scenarios, positive and negative. For positive scenarios, it's much easier for you to implement because basically, you're just validating what you receive, you are applying this, everything should work as expected. And overall, you can cover it simply with code tests, or you can just go through some positive scenarios from your test cases and validate that everything is working as expected. When you are receiving something unexpected, at this stage, you can, of course, kind of try to live with it. You can try to get something from this data. But obviously, your system will be more unstable if you will try to do so. So the best way for you will be to basically control this, to understand what will be the second option, how your application will notify that it's not something that it expects, more details you're providing in the response, better your application is working. But yeah, overall, my idea is that if something passing and it's not correct, less you're doing with this incorrect data, better and more stable your application is.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your answer. I suppose you have answered on this question. And we have a few other questions. And the next one, is it even possible to guarantee the stability of a library if you don't control how it's being used?
Um, I want to answer yes and no, because in this case, I might say that yes, you can still guarantee the stability, but no, because obviously you cannot cover 100% of cases. And for those specific cases, I would say that the most extreme cases is something that probably you will still not be able to cover. So we can, for example, mention the thing that happened at the beginning of this week when AWS region was unavailable. So I'm sure that most of us who was currently presented on this talk actually knew about this. Probably some part of your application didn't work because either it was uploaded to this region, or you just used something that was not available because it was uploaded to this region, or whatever. We used some services from this region. So obviously we cannot be prepared for all cases. When someone is saying you that it will work in 100% cases and it's actually working for 100% cases, most probably you don't need to cover these, tiny percentages that will be failing. You need to stick to the most, helpful thing. You need to stick to main scenarios, and we tried to cover all the cases in the way that we first took list of requirements from our product owners and we tried to cover everything for our own applications. Then we knew that we had some clients who are very very important for our main clients, some customers. So we had to also collect some cases, like specific behavior functionality or like expectations from them and cover them. And only after that, basically, when we had to when we had time and we had to cover some additional cases, we tried to still summarize them and prepare something that will be the most common one. Because when we tried to actually cover like all edge cases, it was a disaster. Because imagine, like, for example, how much tests do you need to cover? Like, how much test cases do you need to check to validate that, like, one button is working as expected when it's working with a form which is like completely random. So obviously you cannot like cover everything every time when you change something. So yeah, you can definitely guarantee the stability, but you cannot guarantee that, like in 100% cases, it will always work stable or as you expect.
Mm-hmm. So thank you for your detailed answer. And we can go to our next question. Can we realistically test every potential issue that might arise when using a shared library?
Realistically, probably no, because even if we will try to just calculate an amount of cases, so imagine you do have a simple website, you need to open it in all currently available browsers. You also need to open it in all available devices because, for example, some like old iPhone may just work a little bit differently from the new iPhone. And obviously there will be someone who will actually find his grandma computer and will try to run it on this computer, which will just work really slow and so on. So no, I don't think that realistically it is possible to test every case. And it's not even about the short library, it's overall about everything. But if we will try to still, say that we might have some non-functional requirements, we might have functional requirements, we might combine everything and build a set of expectations that we want to have and we want to cover. In this case, even with the short library, I do believe it's still possible, because even if there will be some pretty strange case when someone will integrate the library in a way that you never expected. Most probably it will not ruin everything completely. I mean, like if your application, if your library is just breaking because someone just pushed data that you haven't expected, that probably mean that you haven't covered this case specifically, but not that data specifically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. We can't cover everything. And the next question, how do you balance flexibility and safety when involving a shared library?
That's a nice question. I like, especially after this event, after the outage of AWS, I think it's pretty important to say that overall flexibility obviously is very important. But I think at this stage, when we see how many people are actually trying to break all of our systems, probably safety, like always, should be the main tool, but like the main metric, I might say. But safety in terms of actual safety of the data, making sure that something that you're providing, like not will not allow your customers to like break the system, steal something, or get more than they actually need to get, and whatever. So I would say that it's always a dance when you actually need to listen to the music, listen to all the requirements, and try to be in rhythm with it. It's always the thing that you just don't need to try to cover everything. You just need to make sure that you remember about things, and also very important to be able to get back to some previous examples, just to make sure that you cover some cases that were a problem before, and they're obviously not a problem right now because you already fixed them at some stage, but also that they will not be reproducible again after some time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So we don't have any other questions for now, and our time is counting down, so we can finish early. Pavel, thanks for being with us today and sharing your thoughts on stability in shared libraries. I'm sure our audience picked up some useful ideas that can apply in their work. And we will add a presentation deck to our talk page along with this recording after the event. And we'll also send a feedback form by email within an hour. Please feel free to add your comments so that we can make the next events more interesting for you. And that's all for today. Stay tuned, join ProQuality community in YouTube, and have a great day.
Thank you, and bye.
Thank you. Bye.